is an applied psychology panel. So we've got 4 people working in applied psychology, training in applied psychology. We've got Lucy Barlow, who's doing her master's in behaviour change in the Netherlands. We have Julie O'Sullivan, who's a work and organisational psychologist. So really happy to welcome back Julie and Lucy, who are graduates from IADT, applied psychology. We have Seán, who's a trainee educational psychologist, and Aisling Hegarty, who's a trainee clinical psychologist. Both Seán and Aisling working on their doctorates. So I think it's a great opportunity to see people working in various roles and hear about the different ways psychology can be applied. So what we're going to do is start off with brief synopses from our participants of what they're doing now and a little bit about their journey, and then we'll open up into a discussion. And because it's Green Week, we're going to start with Lucy, who's going to fill us in on what she's up to right now.
Great, thank you so much, John. So hello everyone, my name is Lucy, and I graduated from applied psychology in 2020. And I am now studying my master's for behaviour change at Radboud University in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. So yeah, a little bit of a story about how I ended up with behaviour change from applied psychology. I've always been very passionate about finding a way to use my skills to play a role in mitigating climate change. And I was quite worried about how psychology could be a part of that, because a lot of the time we think that psychology is more to do with, you know, clinical psychology or educational psychology or counseling psychology. And while I think they're so important, yeah, if you're interested in sustainable development or anything, you can sometimes worry where you as a psychologist will fit in. And I took a year out after my undergraduate degree. I started looking into masters all over the world, actually. And I found behavior change masters in the Netherlands. And they're obviously studied through English. So I decided to start studying it because, yeah, behavior change can have such an impact within the sustainable development sector and mitigating climate change. So to give an example of where I'm at with behavior change and climate change, I am currently working with a government in a city in the Netherlands, and I am trying to design a behavioral intervention to get companies to turn their lights off in the evening and at nighttime. Leaving lights on is very wasteful when it comes to energy. It also disrupts biodiversity as species depend on natural light cycles. And I am working with the government to figure out why it is that companies are leaving their lights on. And to give you a little bit of insight into what a behavior change practitioner does, I look at, okay, what are the psychological factors that are leading to employees to leave the lights on? So this could be habits, it could be social norms, it's what everyone does, so everyone just leaves the lights on. And once I find these factors, I then develop and design an intervention to try and change this behavior. This could involve the nudging approach, which I think a lot of people have heard of, or other sorts of interventions, which I'd be happy to explain. And yeah, and then I design, and then I test its effectiveness. And that's where the real science comes in, back to statistics and data analysis, which I love so much. But yeah, to give you an example of what I'm doing, but the behavior change field is so huge. You can go into health behavior, you can focus on climate change. There's so much within the field, and I really think it's growing and growing. So yeah, it's a really amazing field for me and others.
Thank you, Lucy.
Sorry, that was it.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. So you're at Nijmegen and it's part of your master's. You're designing an intervention to help companies switch off their lights at night, and that's the way you're applying your psychology. So I suppose what we're going to do is do a whistle-stop tour around all our panelists and then open it up into a discussion. So I think next we're going to ask Julie, who's Julie O'Sullivan is a work and organizational psychologist, who I think 2017 graduated from IADT, if I'm correct. And maybe you can just update us on your journey after graduation and what you're doing now, Julie.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John, and welcome everyone. So yeah, I graduated in 2017, and after that, I just decided to go straight into a master's. I did a 1-year full-time master's in work and organizational psychology in University of Limerick. And I kind of wanted to just go straight in, do a year. I found that to be a great way to do it. And I suppose in terms of why I went into the work psychology side of things is that I suppose started with, you know, what am I most interested in and what do I see as kind of valuable? And I suppose we spend so much time in work. So I felt if I can improve that in any way or help people's experience of that, then that will be valuable. So I kind of wanted to use positive psychology as well. So focusing on solutions rather than problems, you know, and helping people go from if you're doing okay or good, how do you get to great? So I did that master's and then I started working with a small consultancy called Hynes, and I was working as a business psychologist from 2018 till about I think it was September 2021. So that was a lot of, it's mostly kind of team and leadership development in that role. And then now I work as the head of people development with another small consultancy called Jigsaw Better Business. So they're a management consultancy company and they were looking to grow the side of the business of, you know, supporting people and their leaders and their teams and their culture, kind of developing that side of the business. So I would do that. I'd be helping leaders and teams to kind of develop themselves. So I would use, you know, training and coaching. I think the demand for that is there because a lot of companies, I think, are realizing that, you know, you might have maybe people with certain technical skills that will allow them to do their job, but then it's the, you know, the skills that require you to become, you know, a great leader or to, you know, ensure that you're managing and motivating people and bringing them along with you. That's a different set of skills. So those are kind of the skills that I'd be working with. So I think that's pretty much me at the moment.
Thanks, Julie. So working with people in organizations to develop their skills, and I suppose people skills being so important in getting anything done and developing leadership. You're obviously, we can talk a little bit later about how you've developed your ability to do that, maybe what aspects of psychology you've drawn on.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Now we'll move to Seán Oge, who's actually I think is a trainee educational psychologist midway through your doctorate and based at IADT right now. So be good to hear of your journey, Seán, as well.
Thanks, John, for that. Yeah, I wish I was halfway through this doctorate. I'm in my first year. And I suppose everyone, I kind of took a very scenic route to where I am at the moment. I did my undergrad in psychology in WIT when it was a brand new course. Weren't sure I was going to be accredited until I was handed in my dissertation. We got the news that I was. After that, I kept in touch with my friends from class, and one of them put me on to doing a psychology graduate's internship in an organisation called St. Catherine's in County Wicklow. And I worked for a year in an early intervention centre for autistic infants. And after that, there was no jobs. We were in the height of the recession. I went back to my old primary school and I begged my principal for a job. He had none. I begged him, could I do some voluntary work? And he said, absolutely. One day turned into 2 days, 2 days turned into a week. And then next thing I knew, I was doing what was called a job bridge internship. Maybe some of the postgraduates know what that is. After that year, well, actually, it was during that year, I got friendly with teachers on the staff, and they kept nudging me and elbowing me and saying, you should get into teaching, you should get into teaching. And eventually I listened to them, and I decided to start to pursue teaching because I was motivated to become a special education teacher, but I had to become a primary school teacher first. And I got a position then in another local school in junior infant supporting an autistic child. And I got into Hibernia as I was doing that work. And I trained as a teacher in Hibernia. That took 2 years. And then after I qualified in 2016, I worked as a primary school teacher for the last 5 years. And during that time, I did a postgraduate diploma in education, leadership and management, because I had in my head that I might want to become a principal. But then when COVID hit, I had the opportunity to transition from mainstream teaching to special education teaching. Because up to this point, I had taught second class and I was teaching senior infants. And special education was always an area that I had retained an interest in, and I was eager to back into it. So I said, absolutely, I'll take that opportunity. And I applied to do the graduate diploma in inclusive education, learning support, and special education at DCU last year, which I completed. And then that lit the fire, and I began pursuing the doctoral courses. And I was very fortunate to be accepted into UCD. I'm on my first year. Before Christmas, we had our lectures and we completed what was called a school psychology placement. As I was a primary school teacher, my tutors thought it best to place me in a post-primary school, whereas some of the people on my course who previously worked as assistant psychologists were placed in primary schools. And currently this trimester, I have now completed what is called my first professional placement in a psychology support service in education. And that's why I'm here in the Student Learning Centre in IADT. They very kindly agreed to take me on, and very appreciative of that. And when I complete this placement, I'll be working on my research over the summer. I have to submit my systematic review in August, and then I'll be starting my next placement in child disability in the HSE. And that's me. Not quite a brief synopsis, sorry, John.
Well, it's a scenic route, as you say, and it's important for people that the scenic route is also an option. But yeah, you obviously put your foot in the door and took chances there along the way. I just have one question before we come to Aisling. Do you still have to train as a teacher before doing educational professional training?
Absolutely not. No.
No, not.
You need to have a degree in psychology that's recognized by the PSI, and then once you have that qualification, you can add to it a master's. Perhaps it helps having a background in primary education or working as an SNA. However, there's others in my course that are assistant psychologists and never worked as teachers, and they're doing just fine in the course. So
okay, thanks. It was the case that it was an unusual profession and you had to train in 2 different ways in the past, but that's just
that's no longer required.
Okay, thanks. Like with all of our speakers, we can revisit, and you know, you may have questions, but we'll now come to Aisling, who's a clinical psychology trainee. I'm not sure if you're halfway through, Aisling, or at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm just at the halfway point now, which is great. So yeah, I suppose kind of going way back, I would have done my undergrad in psychology in Maynooth. And then I would have taken a little bit of time out. I suppose after the undergrad, I didn't really know whether I wanted to go down the clinical route, whether I wanted to go down kind of another route. But I went on to do the master's in applied psychology in Trinity then. Really enjoyed that course, and I suppose that kind of reaffirmed for me that it was kind of clinical that I wanted to go down. But I suppose when I was actually doing my master's, I worked part-time with a company, private company for children with autism, like a preschool service. So I kind of got into that, and I worked there for about 4 years. I changed roles when I was in that. So I started off as a tutor, then I became a teacher, and then I became a trainer for the company. So I kind of took a little detour, I think, from clinical, and I was kind of questioning whether I wanted to stay in ABA or educational, but then kind of went back to kind of more clinical work then. So I would have worked as an AP in the HSE for about 1.5 years, and then I actually worked in IADT with the National Learning Network as an assistant psychologist as well there for just under 1 year. Between all of that, I also worked as a research assistant in St. Pat's for about 1.5 years, nearly 2 years I worked there. So I kind of started off in a voluntary role, and then it became a paid position. So I suppose in all of that time, just trying to really get the experience that I needed for clinical, I would have applied for clinical. This was my second time to kind of apply to get on. So I suppose, you know, anyone who's probably considering it has probably realizes that there is a lot. It can be a long process and a long journey, but one that like is possible, you know, once you're kind of getting as much experience as you can. So I would have worked as well in a few voluntary organizations as well, like Bodywise. I would have also volunteered at an addiction service as well, in the lead up to, I suppose, pursuing clinical. But as I said, I'm in Trinity College now, and then working with the HSC as well as part of the training. So I'm just at the midway point, and so I'm in second year. So the way all of the colleges do things quite differently, but the way Trinity works is first year is your adult placements, second year is your child and disability placements, and then third year is your either a child or disability and an elective placement. So I just finished working in CAMS in Blanchardstown, and now I'm going back into a teaching block. So that's usually how the course runs, is a couple of months, it's about 6 months placement, and then 5 or 6 weeks lectures and teaching block, and then we go back into placements. We have 6 placements in total across the 3 years. Yeah, I think that's pretty much my overall things in a really whistle-stop tour.
Thanks, Aisling. I mean, in common with educational, I suppose most people are aware that it's not easy to get on to these professional training programs, and there's particular experience you need. And I mean, you need to have experience with as a assistant psychologist. Is that correct for clinical in particular?
Yeah, I suppose it's not necessarily that you have to have experience as an assistant psychologist, but I suppose it's probably considered like the gold standard of the experience that you can get, because I suppose it's giving you the most insight into the role, the systems that you would be working in. So I think it's not that it's I think some of the courses actually, you know, I'm not 100% sure, but I think some of the courses do specifically want it, but other courses don't specifically look for AP experience. Other experience is just as useful. But they'll all vary. So some will want research experience, some will, you know, require a master's, some won't. So it can, you know, I would say to anyone applying, I would look at the course syllabus and the application form to kind of get an idea of what they're looking for.
Thanks. Well, it's great to hear from everyone, and the variety of journeys and motivations and experience. But I suppose one question is, we have an audience now of undergraduates mostly, and be curious to know what skills you feel are central, you know, to your role or important. You know, could throw that question out to anyone who wants to speak to that.
I think I would say, I'm not really sure if it's a skill as such, or a practice, but proactivity, kind of being proactive and looking for opportunities. Because a lot of opportunities that have come to me have just been from, you know, me putting the time and effort into kind of building a network. And regardless of what field you go into, like obviously I'm in work psychology, it's a small world, you know, and if you get to know people, opportunities will kind of come your way. So I think it's that proactivity of sort of going, what do I want, and then how might I kind of go about getting there. But when I say that as well, it's like proactivity, but not panic. You know, it's like trying to strive towards what you want, but if you're not exactly sure what that is, then don't stress, you know, because even if you found your dream job when you're 40, you could still do that for 25 years. You know, it's like you'll have plenty of time probably. It's not a race. It might be natural to kind of compare yourself to other people, but you know, it's not necessarily helpful. So I would say, you know, it's looking out for, you know, what you want. Like work can obviously be sometimes a source of meaning and accomplishment, and, you know, socializing and progression, which is really beneficial, can help you kind of create that meaningful life. So go for it, be proactive, look for opportunities, but not panicking if you don't have it all figured out straight away.
Great, I like that. Proactivity, not panic, as the byline to remember.
I'll jump in. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Lucy.
Both of us. Yeah, actually, sorry, I just really wanted to say on Julie's point as well. I think that you should always, I think that, you know, never feel that there's a prescribed role for what you have to do after you graduate. Because I think in today's day, we all feel this humongous pressure to find an amazing master's and be really successful. And it's really overwhelming for, and one thing I've felt as a young person coming through this, you know, graduating and trying to find jobs and whatnot, there's one element where it's like, oh, there's so many opportunities, so many jobs out there. And then you're just like, but I don't know how I'm going to attain any of them. And I would really recommend people to just trust the process of, you know, working hard and, as you said, Julie, being proactive, but not worrying, oh my God, am I going to get that job? Am I going to get there? You get there. You just, it happens slowly but surely, and trusting the process is something I am trying to do. But also, I also just want to say that find what you like. Don't think, okay, the next step has to be this. Like I decided that, you know, climate change was my thing, and I found something that is helping me to be a part of mitigating climate change. It doesn't have to be, you know, the role that you think you're made to do. So yeah.
Thanks, Lucy. So that, again, speaking to not necessarily, there's not necessarily a fixed series of steps, but there's opportunities for people to sort of find their own way within all of this. And again, there's you're mentioning sort of a degree of patience or trust in the process. We could hear from Seán and then Aisling, perhaps.
Yeah, just to add on to what Lucy and Julie were saying, like they're very, very important points. I mean, there is a lot of competition out there for AP positions and doctoral courses, so it can be quite daunting when you're starting off. But as Lucy said, trust in the process. And one thing I really wished I had done more of when I was doing my undergrad was that I would have been asking for more help. So really, I advise you all, like, your classmates are possibly your biggest resource at the moment. Talk to each other, keep in touch with each other, join your psychological society, join the PSI SAG groups, network, talk to people, because you have to support one another and talk to each other. Because I wouldn't have gotten my position in St. Catherine's if I hadn't kept in touch with my classmate. He guided me into that, and that's what led me on my road to psychology. And really, again, part of the education psychologist role, one of the most important skills, and that is rapport building. And that comes from your capacity to communicate, work with others. And it's kind of, as well, in your work as an education psychologist, you know, it's part of your role to kind of translate the psychological knowledge and skills to lay people. You know, we're children in education, we're children and adolescent psychologists, but we kind of work more with the adults around the children. So, for example, if I was to talk about adaptive functioning assessment, that might as well be Spanish to someone, you know, so I have to be able to explain that and explain it concisely and succinctly to someone else. So again, work on your communication skills, work your rapport, work with your friends, keep in touch with them, and don't be afraid to network with others. You know, get on Twitter, get on LinkedIn, and just connect with people and speak to them. And you'll learn so much by listening and talking to others. So I really, really would advise you all to do that, because I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't gotten help off other people.
Thanks, Sean. So that's a sort of message. I mean, one of the things people take from their degree is the friendships and the people, you know, along the way. And in many ways, I sometimes think that's the most important thing. I should also add, feel free to speak to your lecturers and come into class. And you know, I often feel people are, you know, a lot of people don't ask for help when they could well get help every now and then. So could hear from Aisling as well.
Yeah, I think all the points the guys have made, I would definitely agree with. I think, as you said, Julie, like it is about being proactive, finding the opportunities within the opportunities. So sometimes, you know, you might find a job that you're thinking it's not the exact job that I thought it was going to be, or it's a different kind of way that I thought I'd be working. But actually, you know, opening that up to saying, okay, well, what can I make the most of this, and being really flexible. I think one thing that I think COVID has taught us all is that we have to be really flexible, and I think that's probably one of the most important skills in psychology, is to be able to adapt and change, and you know, make the most of the situations that you have. I think psychology can be a very competitive world, you know, and I think we can easily, you know, as Lucy's saying, we can easily start comparing ourselves. Oh, I should have this, or I should do this, or I should have got this in my degree, or whatever it might be. But actually, I think for me, it's about stepping back and saying, okay, maybe I do need to get this experience in this area, but what have I already got? Like as Seán said, a big part of our role is working with people and building relationships with people, whether that be children, their families, adults, services. So it's about kind of stepping back and saying, okay, yeah, I need to get this experience, but actually, what else do I bring to the role that I probably already have, and that I, you know, what I want to bring to it. So I think it's not getting so consumed in, I have to do this training, or I have to get this qualification, when actually, you know, the biggest part of our job, I think, like the best advice that I kind of had heard from a previous supervisor was, you know, people don't remember what you said or what you did, they remember how you made them feel. And I just think that sometimes grounds me in that, okay, I just have to be myself and a human person, and I can do that, you know, most days. So that just kind of helps. I think it's not getting so consumed into the ticking boxes that sometimes this journey can be.
Thanks, Aisling. So that's a kind of like, it's a plea from everyone to just remember that the kind of human relationships are what counts. And also reminded the quote about, you know, after college, the grades will be forgotten about, you know, and it's the relationships, or maybe the confidence and so on, that will be more important. I just have a question. There's some questions coming in. One question is for Seán, just appreciating the points made from the panel, but Seán said, sorry, Seán is being asked, what specific area do you plan to research, or do you know yet? So I think this is the project you mentioned in the summer.
Yeah, no, very happy to talk about that. So at the moment in UCD, I am conducting my research. I've just been working on a scoping literature review for, it's based upon teachers' sense of personal and collective efficacy when supporting students with anxiety. And I'm looking at this area primarily due to the impact of COVID and what's that doing to children in schools in terms of like school refusal, learning outcomes. And what I'm hopefully trying to do is kind of going to look at what programs are schools using, what strategies are teachers using in their classrooms, and how, I suppose, really going to try and come up with like a shopping list for educators of picking out like the best strategies, programs that they can use to support students in their classrooms that will have anxiety. That's the dream, but it's going to take an awful lot of work. So it's a lot of reading and lot of reviewing, but that's what I'm hoping to do.
That sounds really interesting and relevant in these current times, and hopefully we'll hear how that goes as you progress it.
Okay.
I'm going to pop out questions to different people. Julie, there's a question for you about what leadership qualities do you try to develop for potential leaders?
Yeah, so a lot of the work I would have done would be around emotional intelligence. So I suppose that ability to understand and manage yourself, your own emotions, recognize the emotions of others, and have empathy towards them. And I suppose using emotions to make decisions, manage stress, manage change, all of that. And that's a lot of the work that I would have done, as well as that kind of resiliency and stress management, both for the leaders themselves, who obviously have a lot of competing demands that they need to deal with, but also then helping other people to, helping the people that they manage or lead to be resilient and to cope with challenges and show that they're a supportive leader. Other skills that are coming up quite a bit as well would be being able to be agile and adaptable. Again, we've obviously seen so much complexity and change over the last couple of years, especially. So it's just been helping them to navigate that. Like even at the moment, what a lot of leaders are dealing with is that kind of hybrid workspace where some people want to come back to an office, some people don't. They're trying to, provide that flexibility while not, providing structure as well. It's, it's kind of a bit of a minefield. So I suppose it's a lot of that, those skills around managing yourself to manage others, understanding other people so that you can motivate and influence and work well with them.
Thanks. I'm just reminded of the research on mirror neurons, isn't it? That people, whatever state we're in, whatever emotional state we're in, then tends to be transmitted or picked up by other people. And what you said there about managing emotions and flexibility, it's a question. Flexibility has been mentioned more than once. I think there was a quick question for Aisling about addiction, working in the addiction service, and where you did that placement, if I'm correct in my memory.
Yeah, so I worked in it was called still is around Cool Mind Therapeutic Community. So I would have worked in the men's residential addiction service for the most part, and then I would have moved into, so that was all a volunteer role. So I suppose very much doing kind of like admin-y kind of bits was really, I suppose, the start, but I had a really good opportunity in getting to sit in some of the therapeutic groups that the service would have ran. And I also then started working as part of the outreach team there. So I suppose it's a little bit like what Julie was saying, like initially I remember being in that job and feeling like, oh, I'm not getting as much kind of clinical experience as I'd wanted, and then reaching out to the outreach team then, and from there then what I did mainly was going into prisons. So I mainly went into the DOCUS, or I went into Mountjoy a couple of times, but just doing assessments for people in there who were looking to avail of the service. So it was because it was residential, they could finish off part of their sentences in there, so it was kind of assessing their suitability for the program in the DOCUS, or Cool Mind. So they had two centres, one for men and one for women. So that was where, so as far as I know, Cool Mind Therapeutic Services are still up there, so I'm sure they'd be happy to take a volunteer or two. So yeah, they have a website that maybe people can reach out to that way.
Thanks, Aisling. And a question for Lucy, just about your project in behaviour change. I think it's in Eindhoven. Do you have a sense of what factors might be most crucial or important in helping change behaviour and getting people to switch off the lights at night, or at this stage, or is it, are you at a stage where you could have a sense of what might be important?
Yeah, luckily I'm making some progress on that at the moment, through being able to, well, actually, funnily enough, one of the most difficult parts about my project has actually been getting companies to participate in my research. And this is a huge part about working in the field of behavior change, is that a lot of the time companies and people, they actually don't want to change their behavior, or they don't see a reason, they don't see that there is a problem. So that's been really interesting, trying to motivate companies. And now that I'm working with organizations, I think one thing we all know about climate change and sustainability now is the toughest part is that it's not very tangible. So people don't feel they need to act now because the consequences are still so far away. So trying to get employees of organizations to turn off the lights, to limit carbon emissions, it all feels very random and far away. So at the moment I'm dealing with, it's looking like, how do I actually motivate them, because they don't feel responsible for switch, especially in organizational companies. When it's not your own home, you don't have that same feeling of responsibility to switch off the lights. So there's a lot of factors that I have to play around with. And as Seán Oak said, because we are scientists, we have to do a lot of reading and make sure that everything that I'm coming up with is evidence-based.
Okay, so it sounds like, you know, motivation's a continuum, isn't it? And even you might be working with people who at the moment are kind of might not be that motivated, or might have mixed motivations, and it sounds like you'd be addressing that in the first instance. Great. I mean, there's some questions in about requirements that I honestly think people could look up on the website. So you can look up these various requirements for courses. I'm just conscious of the time and making the best use of the expertise we have here. So one question is, do you have any tips for undergraduates, or in particular on writing a personal statement for a master's? Any thoughts on that particular question?
I think I think it's very easy to fall into this is your experience, and show off, really want to take that as an opportunity to show off all the amazing things that you can do, or but I think it's actually, the clue is kind of in the title. It's a personal statement, so it should be about you, why you want to pursue a certain course, what is it about that course that matches you. Why do you want to study in whatever field, whatever area that might be. And I think sometimes maybe, and I've definitely made these pitfalls in the past, I haven't made it personal enough. I've wanted to say, this is what I got in my degree, or this is what job I'm doing, but actually it's about your motivations, why you want to pursue it, and who you are as a person, because that is so important. So that would be my main advice: make it personal.
Yeah, I think that's really good point.
Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say, I agree with every word that Aisling said. It's so important to be authentic, put your best self across, your skills, your experience, but it's also important to put across why you're suitable for that particular avenue you're taking. So in my case, I was explaining why I was suitable to be an educational psychologist. Aisling would have been explaining why she was suitable to be a clinical psychologist. And it's just, so you have all this experience, you have all these qualifications, but how are they relevant to the area that you want to pursue? That's important in a personal statement as well. How can you make your experience and your qualifications relevant to these courses? They have a lot of applicants. You have to convince them you deserve this, you're the best one, you're going to make the most of this opportunity.
Yeah, I found as well with my one, I think that's something that they'd be worried about would be, say, the statistics and research side of it, kind of ensuring that people can, succeed in the course. So I was kind of putting forward that part of it, saying, oh, I have this, making that clear that I have that experience, because obviously they want people to succeed in the course. But absolutely, like what Aisling and Seán have just said, I think that goes for, if you're applying for jobs or anything like that, it's figuring out who you are, what's your kind of unique selling point, and then being able to clearly articulate that with examples. Like if you're saying, oh, I love a challenge, Okay, tell me about how you've challenged yourself, not just, oh, I was in college, but I went and took on these difficult things because I liked the challenge, you know, showing them, you know, how you have those examples to kind of support what you're saying. And if you don't have those experiences yet, go out and get them, and then you can talk about them, you know. So any sort of opportunities that you can find, you know, bring them in, feel those difficult kind of opportunities or challenges will be helpful.
Thanks, Julie. Lucy, what would your thoughts from you?
If I was to add anything on that, and I think it's already kind of been expressed, but I think that in getting to where I am now in my master's and working with the government, it has always been about my ability to express my passion for working in the field of sustainability and climate change. And that is something that I couldn't express more to you guys, is that find something that it doesn't, you don't have to be like, this is my passion, it's going to drive me for the rest of my life. But find something you're interested in, because there's really no point in going down years of, you know, pain, of study and research, and applicants, and they'll suss you out. They'll know that this is not what you want. So find something you're interested in and go for that, and make them believe in you.
Great, thank you. So really, that there's a message of trying to figure out what you want really, and what you're personally interested in, and starting from that, and rather than the other way around. That's really coming through. So we're nearly out of time. So maybe just any last thoughts or anything else that comes to mind from everyone before we wrap up.
I'd quickly like to say that to anyone that's feeling maybe overwhelmed about what's next, I really felt that as well. And I took a year out during COVID-19, and I really benefited from that. And I really don't think it's going to have a major effect on. I volunteered. I did a bit of volunteer work, and it was amazing. And if you're feeling overwhelmed and not sure, I would really recommend just taking a year out and just exploring other areas, just to make sure that this is what you want to do.
Okay. And the benefit of heading off and taking a break from study is you can learn about yourself, can't you? And you know, I think everyone has had a journey that's been meandering, or has taken little detours, but maybe the value has come through from that, from people. Thank you, Lucy.
I think absolutely I agree with Lucy. I think remembering also like that you have a life outside of psychology, I think is really important. I think sometimes you can fall into when you're comparing, you feel like you always have to be doing more, you should be getting more experience, but actually remembering that there's other things in your life that you want, as well as psychology, because like this is a career that you want to sustain you, like you need to sustain yourself for like years. So it is about remembering that there's other things in life that are, you know, more important, I would argue, than psychology, because at the end of the day, it's a career choice, but it's not the be all and end all. I think when I started to remind myself of that it actually became easier to like pursue the journey as well. So
I think
Yeah,
that's a really good point, Aisling. I was just going to say, Aisling, that I think, yeah, like I think that everyone can fall into that almost, where your identity then is tied to your job title. But then what happens if you lose that job, or you fall out of love with it in, you know, 10 years time? And that can sometimes be really upsetting for people, I think, and you know, because it's so linked to who they are. But yeah, like you say, there's so much more outside of that. I think as well, if I was going to give myself, you know, feedback or advice when I was in first year or fourth year or whenever, is to just not really be afraid of discomfort. I think that, you know, that's where the growth and development is going to happen, is outside of that comfort zone. And I think that I think if I was listening to that kind of fear and discomfort, I probably wouldn't be going out there and trying to, you know, build and maintain a good network of people around me. But once I've kind of stepped outside of that, I've found it's really valuable, you know, like, and it's never been easier to connect in with someone and go, oh, I'm really interested in your work. You know, can we have a 50 or 30-minute virtual coffee, you know, or, you know, drop them a quick message on LinkedIn. And you might learn something, you might get a job out of it, you never really know. But I think, yeah, that would be the biggest kind of learning, I suppose, for me, is just feel that unpleasant feeling and recognize why you're feeling fear or discomfort, and then figure out, is that actually worth listening to? Because often it's not.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, I was just nodding like a dog there to everything Julie was saying, because I'm a former primary school teacher, and now I'm in a university providing help and support to young adults. So I was completely out of my comfort zone coming in here to do this placement, but I'm learning so much and it's so beneficial. And again, I just think it's important to just reiterate the message that, like, don't be afraid to ask people for help. Seek out support. Go to your lecturers. Keep in contact with classmates. Get involved in their societies. Get involved with the PSI. And remember, this is a long road. It's daunting, but take it step by step. It is massively rewarding. It's an amazing job. It's so interesting. You're working with people. You're helping people. It's really, really rewarding. And although there's financial sacrifices involved and personal sacrifice involved, it will be worth it. And I just want to say as well, John, that if any of the students have questions or anything we didn't get covered, I'm here in a lovely building called the Student Learning Centre in Carclea building. If any of your students want to come up to chat to me, just give a knock on the door. If I'm free, I'm happy to speak to them. I'm here most days during the week.
Thanks, Seán. Thanks so much. So thanks. That's great. Thanks, Seán, Lucy, Julie, and Aisling. I think the feedback, I see a little bit of feedback, but I know there's a lot of appreciation for your time. And, you know, I've been inspired, and it's great to see people just a few years out of graduation who've leaned into discomfort, but have also kept a sense of perspective as well. And thanks for sharing your expertise. And we'll finish the webinar there, but hopefully we'll catch up in the not too distant future.